Siri, could you send a message, please? Hey Siri?
The brand new Siri isn't really much of an update. It kind of sucks. For example, is the NBA player Zach LaVine playing tonight? Okay. Come on! It should be able to tell me instead of bringing up stuff from the web.
Siri is one where there was so much promise, but obviously been very disappointing, especially after that first splash.
While Siri was groundbreaking in 2011, Apple didn't build on that early lead. Over time, the assistant fell behind as rivals launched smarter, faster, more adaptive AI tools.
There are a number of things that have held Siri back since it launched several years ago, and it didn't take long for competitors to really catch up to what Siri is doing, most notably Amazon with Alexa. Apple has traditionally been a hardware company. They make great hardware, not so great at the software and services bit of things, and so Siri kind of stayed the same for several years after it first launched.
Apple's strategy has been focused on building generative AI models into its devices, aiming to make daily tasks easier. But industry watchers say Apple has been reactive and slow to match the moves of rivals like Google and Microsoft.
In June of 2024, Apple told the world, hey, we're going to take this new large language model concept, we're going to make Siri more like ChatGPT. This year, back just earlier this spring, Apple said, oops, we aren't able to do this. The product is not where we thought it would be at this point. So this was kind of a huge miss, especially as Apple was already perceived to be behind in artificial intelligence.
So what slowed Apple down? Experts say missed opportunities in model development and internal fragmentation.
They're not developing the models in-house and implementing them in-house. They're relying on third parties and then following the trend. And I think by relying on OpenAI or increasingly other players to be able to do that, they lose that control. They lose the ability to implement the guardrails, the controls necessary to be able to effectively build the correct solution and implement it most effectively and most user-friendly to ensure that it actually aligns with their core principles.
Apple restructured its AI teams, delayed key Siri updates, and was slower than rivals to hire top LLM talent. In 2024, when Apple finally introduced its generative AI platform, Apple Intelligence, users were hopeful, but the rollout stumbled.
Apple Intelligence started rolling out this fall, and it had several different kinds of features. Apple also did another feature that would summarize your notifications, and Apple actually kind of got into hot water for this because the artificial intelligence system was summarizing news stories incorrectly. So, for example, the BBC had a big problem with this where they were pushing out news alerts to people's phones like normal, but Apple Intelligence was interpreting it incorrectly and giving the wrong answer, literally fake news pushed to people's screens. That was another stumble out the gate here for the Apple Intelligence system. It was supposed to kind of smartly tell you what was going on with all your apps, and it didn't really live up to that promise, so they had to walk some of those features back.
The major challenge has been the hallucinations around the news alerts, which have been pretty significant. The other factor is around differentiation and its inability to keep up, inability to act to the leading edge. So when you look at Google, Amazon, Microsoft and others who are building in-house, they're developing AI capabilities, they're able to bring products to market, test, evaluate them, add to them.
Siri, in its most basic form and functionality, has probably not delivered the virtual assistant experience that your average iPhone user is seeking. Apple can still win within the market, but it needs those upgrades to become the virtual assistant that I think we can all dream the dream in thinking about.
Tim Cook addressed this in Apple's Q2 2025 earnings call.
With regard to the more personal Siri, as you mentioned, we just need more time to complete the work so they meet our high quality bar.
Apple declined CNBC's request for an interview for this story. Apple's AI challenges go beyond Siri. They're also about infrastructure, from cloud computing to custom chips to model development. Unlike competitors Google and Microsoft, Apple has not built the kind of full-stack AI pipelines or hyperscale.
Ben bu sigarayı neden içemiyorum? İçemezsiniz, içemeyeceksiniz.
15 gün içerisinde de bu sigara denilen illetten tamamen kurtulacaksınız. Sadece sigarayı mı bıraktırıyor? Tabii ki de hayır. Aynı zamanda sigaranın ciğerlerinize verdiği zararı, oradaki katranı söküp atacak. Şimdi bunu kullanmaya başladığınız zaman sarı sarı balgam çıkarttığınızı göreceksiniz. Bundan sakın endişe duymayın. Sigaranın ciğerlerinizi oluşturduğu katranı söküp atacak. Sizin nefes darlığınıza, hani merdiven çıkarken nefes nefese kaldığınız durumlar var ya, onların hepsi ortadan kalkacak. Sizi sigaradan kurtaracak tek çözümdür karabaş özü macunu. Dediğim gibi 8 saat ara ile bir tatlı kaşığı tüketin. Bakın bakalım daha sigara içebiliyor musunuz? Hadi o sigarayı yakın içinde görelim bakalım. Bu sizin kendi iradenizle olacak iş değil. Sigarayı bırakmak için önce tiksinmeniz gerekmektedir. İnsan sevdiğini bırakır mı? Bırakmaz. İşte bu da tam anlamıyla böyle bir şey. Sizi sigaradan tiksindirecek, isteseniz de içemeyecek hale getireceğim.
Bugün bir hafta oldu sigarayı bırakalı. Bir kez bile elim sigaraya gitmedi.
Cidden herkese de tavsiye ediyorum. Mesela şu anda 5 günden beri içmiyorum.
Başlaması kolay, bırakması inanılmaz zor. Ama şimdi bıraktım.
10 yıldır sigara kullanıyorum. Arkadaşlarım bu metodla bırakabildi.
Sigara içenler, sigaradan kurtulmak isteyip de kurtulamayanlar, ya Rabbi nasıl bırakacağım bu sigarayı diyenler varsa, işte bu karabaş otu macununu kullanacaklar. Bakın öyle bir karışımdan oluşturdum ki, isteseniz de sigarayı ağzınıza süremeyecek, sigaranın kokusu olduğu yerde dahi duramayacaksınız. Şimdi 8 saat ara ile bir tatlı kaşığı tüketmeniz halinde 8 saat sigara içemezsiniz. Yine 8 saat sonra bir tatlı kaşığı tüketin, yine 8 saat içemeyeceksiniz. Bakın sigara öyle bir illet ki, her şeyimden vazgeçerim, sigaradan hayatta vazgeçmem diyen tiryakiler, ama kurtulsam cebimdeki parayı da sağlığımı da korusam diyenler çok fazla.
Cloud systems needed to support cutting-edge generative AI. Instead, Apple's leaned into a very different approach: privacy-first, on-device AI, and outside partnerships.
Apple is different, right? They don't have a cloud business. With Apple Intelligence, at least Apple's own technology, the goal is to be able to say something to the effect of, hey Siri, find the picture of my wife in a red dress. Drive those queries are much smaller. You could run those on your device, so you don't need cloud infrastructure necessarily to run those queries.
Apple has partnered with outsiders for some AI features, OpenAI in the US and Alibaba in China. And Apple Intelligence is only available on newer devices: iPhones with the A17 Pro chip, which include the iPhone 15 Pro and the iPhone 16 lineup, and iPads and Macs with A17 Pro or M1 chips.
I think Apple, by partnering with OpenAI, then partnering potentially with Google and Alibaba and doing all of these different partnerships, means that it's harder to provide that R&D process, that iterative rollout, which supports that kind of more effective go-to-market and implementation. However, you can kind of look at ways in which their partner model that they're going with generative AI could be an asset, could be an opportunity to kind of provide the differentiation.
The strategy means the models Apple trains are smaller, but also more limited. If you ask broad questions like, how does quantum theory affect chip design, Apple hands that off to OpenAI. Still, Apple is spending heavily to close the gap. In February, it pledged more than $500 billion in U.S. investments over 4 years, including new chip facilities, AI infrastructure, and hiring.
The $500 billion investment, this was something that Apple does every 4 years at the beginning of a new presidential term. They like to have a little gift for whoever the new president is or whoever is just sworn in. Now, there's a lot of fuzzy math going on here, and they don't exactly say where all that money is going. And in this case, what they promised the Trump administration is just one factory, and that is going to be one in Houston, Texas, that makes artificial intelligence servers for that private cloud that runs Apple Intelligence.
The company is also reportedly building its own AI chips under Project AC/DC, expanding AI teams and testing localized LLM integrations. But the fundamental issue remains: Apple still doesn't own the full stack.
Without that hyperscaler, without that public cloud infrastructure, they don't have the partner ecosystem for R&D and implementation that the others do. I think there's always going to be challenges around fighting it out with the Googles of the world if in an AI race, if they don't have those in-house public cloud capabilities.
Unlike rivals like Meta, Apple has spent years prioritizing privacy. That means it has not collected the same volume of user data needed to train powerful AI models. It's a strategy that builds brand trust, but limits flexibility.
This is what Apple's always done, and they've always